Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Stevenson Center podcast. This is Jerome. I'm here to debut my podcast as well as wrap it up as my finale. This is the one and only podcast episode that I ever plan to do. But I'm here to tell you a little bit about my experience so far being a fellow at the Stevenson Center. And first I want to share a little bit of background about myself. So I'm from the city of Chicago. I went to undergrad at a small university in Oregon called Willamette University, where I studied politics and economics. And I did AmeriCorps for 2 years after my undergraduate studies. The first year that I did AmeriCorps was at City Year Chicago, where I worked as a mentor and a tutor for children in 7th and 8th grade at a Chicago public school. And it was a really powerful experience. It was a lot of work. It was really, really hard. Worked 60-hour weeks, had a really long commute. It was very draining work. It was really powerful. The biggest reason that I wanted to do that work was because I knew that I wanted to have a career either in public policy or government or advocacy. And I knew that making society more equitable, learning about issues about poverty and how to address them, I knew that I would need some experience that would ground my entire career. And I knew that grad school would be in my future, but I thought that having an opportunity to meet with students and families and community stakeholders and get to know them over time, that it would really help inform context for my entire career. So at City Year Chicago, I was responsible for a variety of tasks. My primary responsibility was to teach math. I had a group of about 8 to 10 students that throughout the entire school year we would do pull-out small group sessions where I would go over individualized lessons with students. And I was also responsible for doing helping with behavioral development, socio-emotional development, I suppose they would put it. And so I really got to know this group of 8 to 10 students throughout the entire school year. Their progress on standardized tests was really used as the method to determine my effectiveness as a tutor, and also the school's effectiveness at kind of maintaining a partnership with City Year. But another key part of what I did was supporting the entire classroom. So when I wasn't doing small group work, I was in a classroom with my partner teacher. And while I didn't lead lessons, I was responsible for helping implement the lessons, doing whole class support. So that was going around and helping kids with their work and helping make sure that they're paying attention, or talking to kids if they're having a tough time at school that day, be able to take a child outside of class and go walk around the hallway and just talk about how they're doing and what's going on. And so I had a lot of flexibility to really speak with the kids, and I really enjoyed that, and the school really encouraged me to do that. I think my teacher was just grateful that I could take out a student out of the classroom who she thought was being distracting, just to make her day a little bit easier at that moment. But I also thought that it was so important for me to be able to kind of develop those relationships. And those relationships was what I was really hoping to gather throughout my career. Another thing I did at City Year was I served as our resource coordinator. So whenever we put on events throughout the school year, I would be responsible for helping kind of come up with a plan for us to get all the donations that we need to make it successful in-kinded. So we did a lot of outreach to restaurants and grocery stores nearby to try to get food supplied to the events. And so I was primarily tasked with creating task lists for everybody. So I'd put together a big spreadsheet of a bunch of restaurants that I'd want us all to reach out to, and then I would divide that up among our team. So I got a little bit of experience managing teams and working with external businesses and creating partnerships. Sometimes we would be able to go to the same Chipotle kind of over and over again, and they would continue to be able to provide food for family nights and whatnot. So I got a lot of experience in the education realm, but then also a little bit of professional skills. But I was never really interested in becoming a teacher. I really wanted to get to know a little bit more about what these students were facing and what their lives were like. I grew up growing up in Chicago. I grew up on the northwest side of the city in Lincoln Square. And I know that part of the city, my experience growing up is a lot different than kids from all over different neighborhoods in Chicago. There's 77 community areas, and each one is unique. And there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of ways that the media portrays certain neighborhoods and certain situations. And I knew that it was going to be important for me to do some of that myself. My second year of AmeriCorps was spent at Cradles to Crayons, which was a startup organization in Chicago that had been established in Boston and had expanded to Philadelphia. Their mission is to provide donations of clothing, books, toys, hygiene products to children 12 years of age and lower. And they had a nonprofit membership-based model. So I spent a lot of time mostly engaging with volunteers who would clean and quality sort and create these kid packs that would go to children. So it was very different than my experience at City Year. It was much more of a charity than a social development type organization or any kind of subversive or systems changing work. But it was a great experience. I got a lot of speaking opportunity. I did a lot of volunteer orientation. I got to meet a lot of donors, a lot of people who would either donate money or donate time to the charity. So while my first year I spent at City Year engaging with a lot of children and families that face housing insecurity and all kind of economic instability, I spent most of my second year AmeriCorps term working with extremely wealthy families and schools from the north side of Chicago to Winnetka and Kenilworth. So it was a very different process. And I eventually decided to apply to Illinois State University after my term was up. Partly because I had so much education awards granted from the 2 years, something like $11,000, and I wanted to be able to spend that on grad school. And I was looking at a lot of programs, public policy programs, economics programs. They're very expensive, and I noticed that Illinois State was nearby to Chicago, which is something that I really valued and wanted to be close to my friends and family. And it was also something that was going to be really financially feasible for me. So I sent in an application after taking the GRE, and I studied for a little bit on that. Ended up getting a pretty good score, one I was happy with, and I sent in an application at Illinois State, and I got in. And so at Illinois State, I've really enjoyed taking my economics classes. I really, when I was younger, I really enjoyed studying economics, and my undergraduate program didn't really do a lot of statistical modeling and teaching me how to do kind of cool things with statistics, and so that's something that I got out of Illinois State, which was really fun. I also really liked learning about how different housing programs worked in Adakari's local economic development class, which is something that's helping me now in my fellowship, which is really what I want to talk about at Housing Action Illinois. I'm working with the policy advocacy team, and I'm learning a lot more about the housing sector and also the rulemaking process of governments, such as when laws are passed, agencies have a tremendous amount of scope and responsibility to interpret the rules that the legislative branch have put together. And there's a lot of lobbying work that's done working with people who I guess we kind of think as bureaucrats, who have a huge role in how policy is shaped. So I think I always knew that you would advocate with lawmakers, but it was really, it's really interesting to me how important it is to develop relationships with people who work in these state and federal agencies who have been doing this work perhaps their whole professional lives and might understand these issues better than lawmakers, or undoubtedly do. And so it's been really, really powerful for me to learn about how this policy advocacy world, it's not just about meeting with lawmakers all the time. It's a lot of relationship building, not only with allies and other organizations to build coalition with, but to really engage with the state agencies. There's a lot of people that go into making housing policy turn into housing law, and there's a lot of time to amend laws and change them as we see fit. Nothing is set in stone, and I think being able to be kind of intimately involved in that process has been something that's really cool, and something that I definitely want to keep doing, and this is a space I want to stay in. At Housing Action Illinois, I'm involved with federal and state level advocacy. So at the federal level, the two major things that I'm working on are working with this Protecting Immigrant Families Coalition. I'm representing Housing Action Illinois on the steering committee, as well as the advocacy and outreach subcommittees. Our main charter is to oppose the Trump administration's public charge rule, which would make it prohibitive for about half the people applying for legal permanent residency. They would be denied because they don't have enough money. Another issue that I'm working on is a change in the funding formula for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Previously, the way it works now and in most places is there's one fair market rent that HUD designates for an entire metropolitan area. But that had some bad consequences, because if you have one rent for the entire city of Chicago, for instance, some neighborhoods are going to be much more expensive, some are going to be much less expensive, and you're basing your subsidy on this macro rent that makes sense if you summarize the entire city, but it really means that a lot of neighborhoods are completely inaccessible for people that are with vouchers or receiving rental assistance. So there's a switch to the small area fair market rent. So for each zip code, and within Chicago there are several dozen zip codes, each zip code would have its own fair rent. So if you wanted to, if you had a voucher and you wanted to live in an area where it was very expensive, you would now get a subsidy that actually matched that. And this was constructed to help people who receive vouchers move into what we call high opportunity zones. So I'm getting to know a lot of people in the housing sector here in Chicago. It's a vast sector. There are several subsectors, from homeless service providers to developers to counseling agencies to fair housing, legal organizations to policy advocacy organizations doing kind of the work that I'm doing now. I'm really excited about this work. I feel like the Stevenson Center partnership with Housing Action Illinois, I'm getting really what I wanted out of this program. I really wanted to come in. I was 24 when I first came in, and I'll be 26 when I graduate. I'll have a master's in applied economics with a focus in community and economic development, obviously, but I'll also have an additional year of work experience. And I've kind of gotten my foot in the door now in the policy advocacy world, where sometimes it can be tough to find employment. And so while there's still not a lot of jobs available all over the place, I've got a lot of professional contacts now. My network has become a lot stronger. And that was one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to work at Housing Action Illinois, was to get my foot in the door, start to learn a little bit more about what policy advocacy is really like as a career, and how to keep it going forward. And so I feel like the Stevenson Center has been really excellent for developing my professional skills as well as my professional opportunities, and I'm really excited to maintain a career in the housing sector. So that's going to wrap up this podcast, but I want to thank you for listening, and please reach out to me if you've got any questions. My email is just my first and last name at gmail.com. It'll be there in the description. So if you want to ask some questions about Illinois State or the Stevenson Center specifically, or you just want to chat and get to know each other, I'd be really happy to talk. So thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.